Anything you see that's imbalanced in the past becomes baggage for the future. And that is the quote of the day. Welcome back, friends. It is Quote of the Day, episode number 3. I'm your host, Sean Croxton. Today's featured speaker is Dr. John Demartini, a man who in 2008, 2009 completely changed my life. And when I say that, it's not hyperbole. It might even be a little bit of an understatement, to be honest. A friend of mine sent me a clip of an interview that Dr. Demartini gave. And I tell you, I listened to that thing hundreds of times, over and over and over again. He shifted my mindset about money. He shifted my perspective on life, the things that happen in life. I was younger then. I had this idea that everything in life was supposed to be positive. And so when something negative happened, I would completely catastrophize it and freak out and be like, oh my God, nothing's ever going to work for me. And what Dr. Demartini helped me do in that interview is to understand that everything has a balance. It's like a law of polarity that, there's no positive without negative. There's no praise without criticism. There's no challenge without support. And I just made that part of my hardwiring, and it has changed the way that I see the world. It has changed the way that I do things. And of course, it has changed my results. In this clip, he talks about something that a lot of us have gone through, especially when it comes to relationships, when we compare the person that we're with to somebody that we were with before. And the person that we were with before, we typically weren't with them for very long. So we didn't get to see the other side of them. And so check out his books. He's got phenomenal books. The Values Factor is fantastic. The Breakthrough Experience. Just buy any of his books and read them and try to catch as many talks as you can. I'll tell you more about him when we get back from this clip. But here's Dr. Demartini.
Now, how many of you have ever had a moment when you have maybe walked down the street, maybe you've been single or maybe married acting single, and you've seen somebody who is extremely attractive to you? I mean, like, whoa. 5 of you. The rest of you are with your head down, I guess. But sometimes you walk down the street and you see somebody that's extremely attractive, yes? Somebody maybe from the opposite sex or maybe the same sex if that's your preference, but somebody you go, whoa. And then what happens, they look by you, walk by you, you look into each other's eyes, and there's light, sparkle that pops in both eyes, you know those things? And you look at them and go, bing. And they walk by, and you're sitting there, and your blood flow is going to different areas, and you're quite inspired, and all of a sudden, they walk by, and you know, I have to go to work, but there's a party that wants to go and find out what that sparkle was. And you go to work, and then at work, you're preoccupied by that which you just saw, and it's hard to be present at work. Would you agree? And then what happens when you're trying to be present at work, your mind is thinking about that, and maybe the scent, or maybe the thought, or the fantasy, or whatever. You create this fantasy about this person, assuming that they got more positive negatives. Now, if you actually got with them, stayed with them, lived with them, etc., you would discover what? That there is also some downsides in there. But during the fantasy, you're not focusing on it, you're only focusing on the positives, yes? Because you like that endorphin and dopamine addiction chemical compounds that are secreted in your brain that give you the fantasy. How many of you ever had fantasies? Know what I'm talking about, fantasies? Okay, good. But the fantasies release these things and we get become addicted to them. We don't realize it. So what happens is you go to work and you're not present. You're fantasizing. Then when you go home, and let's say you're with a girlfriend or spouse, you're comparing them. And because that's got a fantasy of all positives without negatives, then all of a sudden the ones at home that are balanced actually seem more negative than positive now because they don't compare. Does that make any sense? So now the fantasy that walked by now makes you not satisfied with what you are. Can you relate to that? I knew a man that came to a program that went off to Florida to meet a buddy at Club Med. And he went there, and he got there a few hours early before his buddy. He checked in. When he was checking in, a beautiful girl came up next to him in kind of a crop top, short little pants, is out of Florida, the Keys and everything else, Club Med area, tropical area. Comes up there, checks in. He checks her out, checking in, and starts a conversation with her and says, hey, why don't you meet me at the bar, at the pool? And about 20 minutes later, they go down there. They kind of primp up. They get down there. They're fantasizing about the possibilities, business opportunities. And so what they do is they go and they interact and they have a few drinks and All of a sudden, there's this passion that's stirred, and they decide to go back to his room where there's a jacuzzi and a bed and room service. And basically, I'm not going to go into details, but they spent 3 days in this room having discussions. You can fantasize about the rest. Now, as they were doing it, the buddy who came there to meet him called the room. He wouldn't answer the phone. He actually had a girlfriend back home, and he didn't want anybody to know. And so what happened is he had this little fling for these 3 days. Well, the buddy kept calling and never saw him. After 3 days, the girl that he met went on back to London. He went back into where he was in America and had this low-grade kind of blah thing, because after 3 days of absolute ecstasy, and I could go into details if you want. But I won't. So what happened is he had this 3 days of ecstasy. He goes back, ends up dating a few people. That relationship didn't last. Dated a few more people. Finally gets a woman, gets married. This is now 10, 11 years later. He comes to me. He's disturbed and unfulfilled in his relationship because it's just not passionate. It's just not fulfilling. It's just not working the way he wants, etc. And I said, what are you comparing it to? And what it was is in the back of his mind from 10 or 11 years earlier, he still had the scent and the passion moment of ecstasy and pleasure that almost anybody can do for 3 days, but not for longer. Got my point? So what has happened is he was still, in a sense, caught in the memory, the fantastic memory that he had of this woman, and he was still doing it. And for the 11 years, he was comparing every relationship he had to that piece of baggage that he had, that experience he had. So when I asked him, well, it seems to me that you're not fulfilled because you're comparing it to this moment that's sort of ecstatic, that's not real for a long-term relationship, but it may be fine for 3 days. Unless you're just going 3 days into the next relationship, 3 days into the next day, you're probably not going to keep at that. You'll probably be numb to it and accommodate to it, and you probably wouldn't appreciate it anyway. So we got to go back to that event, and we got to find out the drawbacks. He goes, oh man, there ain't no drawbacks. I said, no, we got to find the drawbacks. They're there. You just haven't seen them. He says, brother, this was special. I said, well, that's the reason why you're not appreciating what you got. Let's look at it again. So what are the drawbacks of that girl when you're with her? He goes, I don't know. I don't see any. I said, let's go look again. Okay, well, yeah. She did have to wash her hair a lot. It was kind of thin. It oiled up really quick after all the sweating and stuff. So she had to go and wash her hair a lot. That was kind of frustrating. Okay, what's another drawback to her? Yeah, she did kind of have a short legs and kind of a long waist. And that wasn't quite, now that I think about it. What else? Well, yeah, she did kind of have a whiny voice. And it seemed like kind of youthful. And what else? Well, yeah, she wasn't really ambitious. She'd gotten, somebody paid for that trip, and she really wasn't ambitious, and I'm definitely ambitious. And what else? Well, now that I think about it, one of the tooth was crooked. I kept catching it. I realized what I said. It's not what I was thinking. I have to be really careful with this group. Because I think only purity. Or is that my side that I've been putting on that facade for her? Well, it's called sacred profundity. Profundity. So anyway, where was I? So we came up with some other drawbacks, and we noticed that as we accumulated the drawbacks and took her off the fantasy, as she was coming down off the fantasy, all of a sudden, he got tears in his eyes. And I said, what's happening? He says, all of a sudden, I feel the presence of my wife. And I said, tell me about it. He says, I'm appreciating her. I said, can you see that fantasy of your past has kept you from appreciating your life? He said, yes. But now that you brought that down and took in that positive without negative and put a balance of positive and negative together so you could see the full magnet, all of a sudden, my wife, I'm appreciating her. I don't know how to say it. I'm just appreciating her. I couldn't do it because I kept comparing her. And I wasn't even aware of it till you brought this all to the surface here. But right now, I realize that I also, during that time, associated pain with my friend, was angry at me. He lost some trust in me. It affected our business deals. Affected the relationship when I got back. She didn't trust me. I lied to her. I was not clear, and all this other stuff. And I've had this unclear consciousness, I guess, sitting at all that time. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling appreciative of all those women along that journey that I didn't appreciate, and particularly my wife. And then I went over to him. I said, "So can you see that you've been seeing more drawbacks and benefits in your wife, which has lost some of your intimacy with her?" He says, "Yes." And the more I was fantasizing about her, I could see that I was actually comparing her and therefore not appreciating her. And right now I could see the benefits. And I said, "Can you see some more benefits in your wife?" And we just sat down and looked at some more benefits. So it was balanced. And he had tears of appreciation for his wife. Even though he'd been married a number of years, he couldn't appreciate it because he had in his memory a piece of baggage. I call it baggage. Anything that you see that's imbalanced in the past becomes baggage for the future.
Now, how many of us can relate to that one? I know I can, not just in relationships, but in other aspects of our lives where we just see one side without considering the other. When we get caught up in a fantasy and an illusion and we start comparing our realities to that. And this is just real powerful stuff from Dr. Demartini. One thing I forgot to mention in the intro is that interview of the doctor that I listened to over and over and over again. I'm going to post that to my Facebook page. So that's facebook.com/Sean Croxton. I'll leave it pinned to the top of the page for the rest of the week. So you can go over there, listen to it, download it, and just listen to it over and over and over again because it's a real game changer. Dr. Demartini's website is that's drdemartini.com. That's drdemartini.com. You can learn more about his books, his CDs, his DVD programs as well. And he also teaches the breakthrough experience pretty much every other weekend somewhere around the globe. So if you want to attend his live event, the breakthrough experience, do it. I hear really amazing things about it. I actually need to do it myself. So look for that on his website as well. You learn about your values. You'll find your purpose. You'll make sure that your goals are matched up with your values so you can not sabotage yourself. I hear that you walk away from that experience a completely different person. So one more time, drdemartini.com. I will see you tomorrow with some more Bob Proctor. See you then.